This is a Salvia divinorum 10x extract, trip report by Smortis, posted to erowid.org on October 16th, 2008. I was sitting in a small canvas tent that I had set up in my garden. The tent was a simple structure, a few poles, a piece of fabric that flapped in the light breeze, and a small rug on the floor. It was late in the afternoon, and the sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the grass. I had invited one of my best mates, Jay, to join me. Jay was a longtime friend, someone I could trust with anything. He had brought his younger brother, M, along. I did not know M very well, but he seemed polite and curious. The three of us were alone in the garden, away from the house, away from any other distractions. We had decided to try Salvia divinorum that day. I had obtained a 10 times extract, a very strong preparation. My intention was not to chase a visual trip for its own sake. I wanted to see what would happen when I let the plant work on my mind. I told Jay that I hoped to learn something about the way my thoughts are built, that I wanted to watch the edges of my perception blur, and perhaps to find a new angle on a problem that had been bothering me for weeks. Jay nodded and said that he was happy to be there as a witness and a support. He reminded me to stay calm and to breathe. We set up a small glass bong on a low table inside the tent. The bong was clean, the water clear. I loaded the bowl with the salvia extract, a small amount, enough for a strong hit. The first pull was smooth. The vapor entered my lungs, warm and slightly sweet. I held it for a moment, then exhaled. The room seemed to shift ever so slightly. The fabric of the tent took on a faint, wavering texture, as if the surface were made of thin scales. The green of the grass outside looked a little more vivid, the shadows a little deeper. I felt a small laugh bubble up inside me, an involuntary chuckle. There was nothing funny about the situation, no joke, no absurdity, yet the very fact that my brain decided something was amusing made me laugh. The laughter felt light, like a bubble rising to the surface. I took a second hit. The same sensation repeated, but now it seemed to add a thin layer over everything I could see. The world appeared to be covered with a fine, shimmering film, like frost on a window. The edges of objects were not sharp. They were softened, as if someone had taken a soft brush and smudged them. I felt a slight pressure in my temples, a gentle throbbing that was not painful. My mind was still clear, but the ordinary details of the tent were now slightly distorted, like a photograph that had been run through a low-resolution filter. I decided to take a third hit. Jay asked me, "How are you feeling?" I tried to answer honestly. I said, "I feel drawn to this side of the tent. I feel like I need to sit over there." My voice sounded a little higher than usual, but the words came out as they should. I felt a rotating energy, a sense that everything around me was turning slowly, like a slow-moving carousel. I pointed to a corner of the tent, the far left corner where the fabric met the ground. Something in that spot seemed to call to me. I did not know why, only that there was a warm, caring feeling emanating from that corner, as if an unseen hand were gently holding the left side of my body, keeping me from falling. I moved to the corner and sat down. The moment I placed my weight on the floor, a buzzing sensation spread through my limbs. It was not an excited buzz, nor was it a pleasant thrill. It was a subtle vibration, like the feeling you get when a phone is on silent and you can still sense its faint hum. My skin felt as if it were covered in tiny pins and needles, but there was no pain, no irritation. It was simply a sensation, a texture of feeling. My sense of humor seemed to sharpen. The jokes in my head were no longer the lazy, dopey jokes I get when I smoke cannabis. They were crisp, witty, clever. I could see the punchlines before the jokes even formed. I felt a warmth on the left side of my body, as if an invisible presence were holding me up, acting as a seatbelt that prevented me from tipping over. It was comforting, yet it also made me aware of my own physicality in a new way. I took a fourth hit. I cannot remember the exact moment I exhaled. The breath seemed to blend into the next sensation. Suddenly, the space between the tent and the world outside dissolved. There was a black void, an absence of any visual reference, a darkness that was not simply the lack of light, but a gap between what I had known as reality and what I was now experiencing. In an instant, I found myself no longer in the garden, no longer in the tent, but inside my own mind. I was walking on a surface that seemed to be made of my own thoughts, my own mental state at that moment. The floor beneath my feet was an abstract, spinning tunnel that stretched into infinity. The tunnel was a swirl of green and purple, colors that blended and separated like oil on water. J and M, who had been sitting across from me a moment before, now seemed to be millions of miles away. Their voices, if they existed at all, were muffled, as if heard through a thick wall. I felt a million miles away from my own body, which was still somewhere in the garden, perhaps still breathing, perhaps still holding the bong. Time seemed to freeze. The clock on the wall of the tent, which had shown 12 p.m. just minutes before, no longer mattered. In this new space, time was a still pond, unmoving, unchanging. I was no longer mum as a human being. My memories, my emotions, my history fell away like a coat that I had taken off. I was simply a point of awareness moving through a corridor that stretched endlessly. The corridor was lined with a repeating pattern of green and purple light, each hue pulsing in time with an unseen rhythm. I could not find any landmarks, no doors, no windows, only the endless tunnel that seemed to spin around me. Then I saw faces. J and M's faces appeared in the distance, framed as if in a family portrait. Their skin was an odd shade of orange, their hair a deep purple, colors that did not belong to any human palette I knew. They were not physically present. They were more like images projected onto the walls of the tunnel. The lining of the tent behind their heads became an infinite spinning prism, a kaleidoscope that repeated their images over and over. They rotated, sometimes appearing above me, sometimes behind me, always present, always distant. Their presence was multiplied. I could see dozens of them, each slightly different, each looking at me with an expression that I could not read. The feeling of being watched grew stronger. It was as if they were all staring at me, their gazes like daggers, their thoughts aimed at my core. I sensed that they were saying things about me, but the words did not come through as sound. They were more like thoughts that brushed my mind, like a telepathic voice that whispered in a language I could not fully understand. The tone seemed mocking, as if they were laughing at my existence, at my attempt to grasp anything in this place. I felt a helplessness that I had never known. I could not move, could not speak, could not act. I was a passenger in a vehicle that I could not control. The sound of the garden, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant hum of traffic, all seemed slowed down as if filtered through a thick syrup. The noises were still there, but they stretched, elongated, losing their urgency. My own breathing sounded like a low drum, each inhale and exhale a measured beat that matched the slow pulse of the tunnel. The visual field was a spinning mass of green and purple, an infinite tube that seemed to have a million exits, none of which I could reach. I felt as if I were an ant on the skin of a giant creature, moving over a surface that was both familiar and alien. A strange, naive feeling settled over me. I felt like a newborn, fresh and unburdened, seeing the world for the first time. The warm presence that had held my left side in the tent now felt like a gentle current that kept me from falling into the abyss. It was both a guide and a barrier. I tried to focus on the fact that I was still in a tent in my garden. I told myself that I knew J and M, that I had known them before this. I tried to anchor myself to that knowledge, hoping it would be a rope to pull me back. The tunnel began to fold in on itself, the repetitions of the dimension collapsing like a deck of cards being shuffled into a single stack. I felt a buzzing again, the same pins and needles sensation, now concentrated on the left side of my body. It was as if the invisible presence was urging me to lean against the side of the tent, to find a point of contact that could bring me back. My vision started to shift, the green and purple spirals becoming less intense, the faces of J and M beginning to smear, their outlines turning into slow, spinning smudges. The smears then resolved, becoming the real people again, sitting across from me, their eyes still fixed on me, but now with a more ordinary expression. I felt a sudden surge of relief, as if a weight had been lifted. The tunnel was still there, but its edges were receding, the endless corridor giving way to the familiar shape of the tent. My body seemed to spin back onto its own axis, the left side that had felt weightless now feeling solid again. I was aware of the rug under my feet, the faint smell of the fabric, the cool evening air that brushed my skin. The world outside the tent seemed to breathe with me, the garden returning to its normal rhythm. Jay spoke, his voice cutting through the lingering haze. "Do you think we should get out of the tent?" He seemed concerned, but I could not find the words to answer. I tried to nod, to indicate that I agreed. My eyes felt heavy, but I did not blink. I was still aware of the tent, of the fabric, of the space I occupied. I felt a strange mixture of gratitude and confusion. I wanted to leave, to step outside into the fresh air, to feel the grass under my feet again. At the same time, a part of me wanted to stay and explore the strange corridor that had shown me a glimpse of something beyond ordinary perception. The moment stretched, the boundary between the interior of the tent and the outer world blurring. I sensed that I was on the cusp of returning, that the tunnel was beginning to dissolve, that the infinite repetitions of the green-purple corridor were folding back into a single point. I could feel the buzzing on the left side of my body again, a reminder that the experience was not yet over. I could feel the warm, caring presence still holding me, still keeping me from falling, still acting as a seatbelt as I prepared to re-enter the ordinary world. I was aware that I was about to step out of the tent, that the darkness of the tunnel would give way to the dim light of the garden, that the faces of J and M would become solid again, that the laughter that had started in the first hit would perhaps return in a different form. I felt a mixture of anticipation and a lingering sense of loss, as if I were leaving behind a place that had shown me something important, something that my mind could not yet name. The experience was still unfolding, the early peak still alive in my mind, the colors still swirling at the edge of my vision, the buzzing still humming in my left side. I remained there, poised between two worlds, waiting for the next wave to carry me further. The next wave rolls in like a thick curtain of wind that presses against the side of the tent and then slips through the fabric, pulling the colors I had seen into a tighter knot. The green and purple tunnel that had been spiraling around me begins to thicken, the edges of the corridor becoming more solid, as if a hand were drawing a line with a bright marker. My left arm, which had felt like a seatbelt, now feels like a wooden rod pressed firmly against my ribcage. The pressure is not painful, it is simply the weight of something that will not let me drift away. I noticed that the faces of J and M, which had been a blur of orange skin and purple hair, now resolve into 100 copies of themselves, each one slightly out of phase with the next. They are all looking at me, their eyes flickering like tiny lanterns. Their mouths move, but the words do not reach my ears. Instead, I hear a low hum that seems to come from the floor of the tunnel, a sound that vibrates through my teeth and into the back of my throat. The hum is steady, like the drone of a distant engine, and it makes my heartbeat feel slower, as if time itself has been stretched out into a long ribbon. My breathing becomes shallow, each inhale feeling like I am drawing in a thin mist that carries the scent of damp earth and old wood. I can feel the moisture on my tongue, though there is no water present. My tongue is slightly swollen, and the taste of metal lingers at the back of my throat. I try to speak, but the words get caught in the thick air of the tunnel. My throat feels like a small pipe that is partially blocked. The sound that emerges is a soft, high-pitched squeak. The visual field expands beyond the tunnel. I can see the walls of the garden outside the tent, but they are far away, like a painting seen through a fogged window. The grass is a deep, almost black shade of green. The leaves of the plants are edged with a thin line of electric blue. The sky is a flat sheet of pale gray, with no sun, no clouds, just a uniform surface that seems to pulse gently. The pulse of the sky matches the pulse in my left side, the same buzzing that has been present since the first hit. It is a tingling that runs from the shoulder down to the fingertips, like 1,000 tiny needles touching the skin. I become aware that the tunnel is no longer a single line, but a series of concentric circles that rotate around a central point. The central point is a bright white spot that does not illuminate the rest of the tunnel, but draws my attention like a magnet. I try to move toward it, but my body does not respond. I am a spectator, watching my own thoughts drift past like leaves on a stream. Each thought is a bright flash of color that appears for a moment and then disappears. Some of the flashes are words, but they are scrambled, as if the letters have been rearranged by a child. The feeling of being watched intensifies. Copies of J and M now seem to be speaking to each other in a language that I cannot understand, yet I can feel the tone of their conversation. It is sharp, it is mocking, it is curious. The tone shifts rapidly, like a radio that is being tuned from one station to another. At one moment the tone is angry, at the next it is amused, then it becomes indifferent. I feel a cold shiver run down my spine, as if a draft has entered the tunnel, even though there is no wind. The peak of the experience arrives when the tunnel collapses inward, the walls folding like paper into the central white point. The point expands, filling my entire field of vision with a blinding light. The light is not painful. It is a soft, warm glow that feels like the heat of a campfire held close to the face. In that glow, I see the outlines of my own body, but they are made of thin, translucent threads. I can see the blood flowing through the veins, the muscles contracting and relaxing, the breath moving in and out. I can feel the weight of my own head, the pressure of my own heart, the rhythm of my own pulse. It is as if I have been placed inside a transparent version of myself and can watch every internal process. At the same time, the voices of J and M become clearer. They are not speaking to me directly. They are speaking to the version of me that I am watching. They comment on the way my heart beats, on the way my lungs expand, on the way my mind flickers between images. Their words are simple, almost childlike, but they carry a weight that feels like an accusation. They ask, "Why do you run? Why do you hide? Why do you fear?" The questions echo in the tunnel, reverberating off the walls that no longer exist. The sensation of being in control disappears completely. My mind is a blank screen, and the images that appear on it are not my own. I am a passenger on a train that is moving faster than any speed I have ever known, the scenery outside a blur of color and shape. The train does not have wheels. It is propelled by an invisible force that pushes me forward. The force feels like a gentle pressure on the back of my head, as if someone is holding a hand to keep me from falling. After a few moments, the white light begins to dim. The tunnel reforms, but now it is made of a softer material, like velvet. The colors are muted. The green and purple have faded to pastel shades of teal and lavender. The buzzing in my left side becomes a low, steady vibration, like a phone set to silent mode. The copies of J and M are still present, but they are fewer in number, perhaps a dozen instead of hundreds. Their faces are now clear, their features recognizable, their eyes no longer flashing with judgment, but simply looking. I feel a sense of relief, as if a weight has been lifted from my chest. The pressure on my left arm eases, and I can move my fingers again. I wiggle them, feeling each joint snap back into place. My breath deepens, the air filling my lungs feels cooler, fresher. I can hear the faint sound of insects outside the tent, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of a car passing by. The external sounds are not distorted, they are ordinary, but they seem louder because my ears have been tuned to pick up the smallest vibrations. I remain in this plateau for several minutes, the scene holding steady. My mind no longer races. It sits like a still lake, the surface smooth, reflecting the soft light of the tunnel. The thoughts that come now are simple, like the feeling of my feet touching the ground, the sensation of my stomach settling after a sudden drop. I notice the taste of the saliva in my mouth, the slight metallic aftertaste that remains from the salvia. I am aware of the small cut on my fingertip where the bong had touched it earlier, the sting of it still present but muted. The plateau begins to shift when the tunnel walls start to thin, as if someone is pulling them back, revealing the space beyond. The pastel colors fade, replaced by the ordinary gray of the garden walls. The bright white point that had been the center of everything recedes, becoming a small dot in the distance. The copies of J and M dissolve, their outlines blurring until they become ordinary silhouettes. Their voices fade into the background, becoming ordinary speech again. I feel my body being pulled back toward the tent. The sensation is not abrupt. It is like a gentle tide drawing a leaf toward the shore. My feet touch the floor of the tent, the fabric of the canvas against my skin. The smell of incense that had been faintly present in the tunnel becomes the smell of the dry earth outside, mixed with the faint scent of the bong. I can see J and M again, their faces now normal, their eyes no longer glowing. They look at me with concern, then with a hint of amusement. I open my mouth to speak, but the words come out slowly, as if each syllable has to climb a steep hill. I manage to say, "What happened?" Jay looks at me, his brow furrowed, and says, "Do you think we should get out of the tent?" The question lands on me like a stone. I nod, my head moving in a small, jerky motion. The tent flap is pulled open, and a rush of cool air hits my face. The light outside is dim, the garden bathed in the late afternoon glow of a sun that is low on the horizon. I step out of the tent, the grass brushing against my shoes. The world feels solid, the ground firm beneath my feet. I shout, "Oh my God, the dear sweet outdoors of this tent." My voice echoes slightly, but the sound is clear. The garden is quiet, the only noise the distant chirp of a bird and the faint hum of a neighbor's lawnmower far away. I feel a sudden wave of gratitude that I am back in a place I can recognize. The feeling is not one of relief alone. It is a deep appreciation that the ordinary world is still there, that the walls of the tent are just fabric, that the sky is still above me. I walk back into the house, my steps unsteady at first, then steadier as my muscles remember how to move. I sit on the sofa, the cushions soft against my back. I keep my eyes open, watching the room as if I might see another flash of color. Nothing appears. My mind is quiet, but there is a lingering echo of the tunnel, a faint afterimage that fades slowly. I try to focus on the television that is off, the empty space of the screen, the black glass that reflects the room. It is normal. The immediate come down lasts for about 10 minutes. During that time I feel a light headache, a pressure behind my eyes that feels like a band tightening. My left arm still has a faint tingling, but it is now a gentle buzz, like a phone vibrating on silent. My heart beats at a normal rate, but I can feel each beat as a small thump in my chest. My thoughts are fragmented. I catch myself trying to remember the exact sequence of images, but they slip away like water through my fingers. I find myself smiling at the absurdity of it all, the way my mind had turned a simple tent into an infinite corridor. After the initial come down, the after effects settle in. The first hour after the experience is marked by a heightened sensitivity to sound. The ticking of the kitchen clock feels louder, each tick a small hammer striking against my eardrum. I find myself flinching when the phone rings. The ringtone is a sharp, piercing sound that makes me want to cover my ears. Yet, at the same time, I feel a strange calm inside my head, a quiet that is not the same as boredom. It is a stillness that allows me to hear the faintest details, the rustle of a leaf outside the window, the soft sigh of the wind. My mood is a mixture of irritation and indifference. When M asks me about the game he has installed on his computer, I feel a surge of anger that rises quickly, then drops just as fast. I want to answer, but the words feel heavy, as if they are made of lead. I respond with a short, clipped sentence, and the anger fades, leaving behind a numbness. The irritation is not directed at M specifically. It is a general feeling that any external stimulus is an intrusion into the space I have just left. I find myself wanting to unplug the television, to turn off the lights, to close the door and sit in darkness for a while. Sleep comes unevenly that night. I lie in bed, the sheets cool against my skin, and my mind drifts between the memory of the tunnel and the ordinary sounds of the house. I hear the refrigerator humming, the distant bark of a dog, the occasional car passing on the street. The images from the experience flicker in and out, sometimes as a bright white point, sometimes as the pastel tunnel, sometimes as the faces of J and M. I wake up several times, each time feeling a little more disoriented, as if I am still half inside the tunnel. The sleep is fragmented, but I manage to get a few hours of rest before the morning light filters through the curtains. When I get up the next day, the world still looks slightly altered. The kitchen lights are a warm yellow hue, as if I am looking through a pair of tinted glasses. The colors of the walls are muted, the green of the plants a little more vivid.